All right. Good morning again.
How are you? Everything fine?
Everything is fine. It's day 3, so we're all a little more tired than the first day we started off.
I,
Uh,
yeah, I
it's been a lot, but we're also doing a lot more data gathering in the sense of tracking recordings and all of this stuff than we did last year. Last year was more of a broad, loose conglomeration. So this year, with the increased amount of detail we're putting into it, it's a little more to keep track of every session. But I think we're getting to the end of it. It's been a great conference thus
yeah.
far. So hello, Ms. Rubin. Welcome, welcome. And okay, Erman, we are sharing co-host duty with you. And Heather, co-host duty with you.
Hi.
Okay, so both of you have co-host duty. So you should have all permissions, requirements, etc. for screen share or whatever is necessary. Just like last time, Aaron, I will be checking in and present, but I will be flipping around to doing other jobs at the same time. So I'll just mute my mic, mute my camera, and be here for help if needed, but otherwise keeping track of some other stuff. So this is great. And wow, we've already got people coming in, which it's what we're finding is most attendees show up about 2 minutes after class starts, which makes us just like the students.
Yeah, we're all the same.
That's exactly it. So I'm expecting a good turnout. I've been very, very pleased with turnout for all the different sessions. I think we kind of gambled on a morning chunk and an evening chunk, but I think our gamble has paid off with making it available to people in different parts of the world. So it works out nicely. Well, Ermont, it's all yours. Have fun. Heather, it's all yours. And I will mute myself.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Hello, everybody. So I'm sure we'll have some people joining us as the minutes go on as the session starts to roll. So let's just take care of some housekeeping as we wait for everybody to come in. I just posted in the chat a link to the shared folder. So if you want to take a moment and open up that folder, you can explore some of the resources in there. I'm going to take a look at our participants window for a minute and see who's joined us. In the waiting room, German, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. Ready to help you in anything you need. Are we getting people in? So anything you need, I'm here.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say that's so helpful. I'm so glad you're there. And we can't disable the waiting room. So if you wouldn't mind, as people join in, if you can just admit them. So
Yeah,
I'll
no problem.
stop. I'm not going to pay attention to that right now. So thank you so much.
I'll take care. Don't mind.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. And so if everyone wants to just check in for a moment and let me know, first of all, where you're from and are you familiar with SOFLA? Have you heard about SOFLA before? How familiar you are with SOFLA? So if you just want to take a moment. Hi, Kazuka, how are you? Hi, Carolina. So we have 13 participants, and I just want to get an idea of who in the room is familiar with SOFLA. Are you familiar with SOFLA? So why don't you just put a Y for yes and N for no, and then if you want to introduce yourselves, that's fine too, but let's keep it simple. So if you're familiar with SOFLA, you're going to put a Y in the chat. If you are not familiar with SOFLA, you're going to put an N. If anybody can hear me, I got a yes. I know we have many experts in the room, which is nice, but I also want to make sure to accommodate those of us who are just curious and joining in and want to know more about SOFLA. We only have an hour to spend today, and so I'm hoping to use this session as a kind of a working collegial circle of sorts. We're going to look at brand new documents that we've created to help support the design of lessons and the delivery of lessons with using the SOFLA model. So at the same time that those of you who are unfamiliar with SOFLA, I'm going to be including like what the steps are, just so you understand and we're all on the same page. But I'm going to ask you all to look and work on the documents together so that we can improve them and see if they work. You know, we've been using them and developing them since we did a really big online course in the winter, and that's where they started. And so we've been refining them. And so we hope to get some feedback from you and also teach you about the model at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, and so right now, if you had the link in the chat, this is what you're looking at, right? You're in this drive, and I just want to tell you a little bit about what is in here. If you had completed the pre-work, you would see that this folder already, right? Maybe some of you did it. So you can't make any assumptions. Unfortunately, this is a one and done kind of session. I hope to see you guys again, but I'm not, you know, obviously not sure we're going to meet again. So I want to make sure you understand what's in here if you want to use these resources. So there is a video that introduced the pre-work, and then you have the different rubrics, documents that we're going to go over today. There's an article about fostering teaching presence using the SOFLA model by Dr. Marshall. And here, this document might come in handy today. This is a link to all the resources that we're using during the session. So if you want to just open up this links to resources here, if you need to follow along, you can always get to each individual document using this resources. When we get to our working session, we're going to be reviewing this 7th grade SOFLA lesson as a sample, and just to see how it might relate to your planning practices, okay? So let me get started. Let's go back. So when we decided to do this session, it was really, like I say, an attempt to pilot these documents and see how they work in practice, right? And my name is Heather Rubin, and I'm an administrative coordinator for the NYSID Long Island Auburn. I work as a resource specialist on providing instruction for English language learners all across New York State. And I'm really passionate about flipped learning and its implications for our digital age learning environment now. It's become so relevant, and I love instructional design. So if you need to contact me, you can email me at hrubin@esboces.org, and I'd be happy to stay in touch with you. So here's what we're going to do today. Okay, we're going to briefly review the SOFLA definition and lesson cycle, so we're all on the same page. We're going to introduce the SOFLA rubrics, as I explained, and some of the resources for designing and delivering SOFLA lessons. We are going to evaluate a sample SOFLA lesson using the lesson review rubric. And then hopefully, if we have time, we'll have some Q&A, but we'll be doing that all along. So feel free to post your questions in the chat, and we'll address those as we go along as well. And we're going to really target this question: how can we use rubrics to improve our SOFLA lesson planning and delivery? And some of the questions in the pre-work were around that. I wanted you to think about those of you who obviously are here because you love flipped learning, you want to learn more about flipped learning. And so you already have ideas about how you prepare and plan your lessons, how you deliver your flipped learning lessons. We all know, if you listen to Aaron's keynote, there are many iterations of the flipped learning model and how we integrate it into our own instruction. So I wanted you to think about that. And I wanted to think about how we can all improve our practice through the use of rubrics, how we can use them as peer reviews, how we can help students follow along in remote lessons using Hyperdocs, and ways that we can, you know, kind of solidify the way we assess and deliver our own instruction. Because I'm a teacher trainer, you know, that's what I do. And so I'm always looking at ways to help teachers improve their practice. So if you haven't already done so and you're just joining us now, I would love it if you would follow the link in the chat to our shared folder and explore some of the resources that are in there. And we're going to be using them throughout the session. And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. I can put this in the chat again if you need it. Let me just put that in there for you. And that should get you where you need to go. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about, I'm sorry, I'm getting interrupted. Hold on a second. Thank you. I'm working, I'm not working in a private office, so somebody's checking in on me. Sorry about that. All right, so you should have a link to the Google Drive folder. And we talked about pre-work. So I'm just going to put this out there. You know, this is the first step in the SOFLA cycle. It happens prior to a meeting with your students. And there's always the question, did you do it? You know, so if you want to put a yes or a no in the chat, and this is not to point any fingers, this is just to start a conversation. If you did it, you're putting a Y. If you didn't, you're putting, if you didn't do it, you're putting an N. And this gives me an idea of if you were able to or not. And then let's just have a brief conversation about, you know, how we improve our process, especially in obviously any flipped learning cycle. How are we going to ensure that the pre-work is relevant to the work we're doing in class and that students feel motivated to complete it and that there's some connection between that, right? So that's another thing that the rubric is going to try and build in. So I got a partially, I got yes or no. So you see, and that's perfectly fine and acceptable. You know, whatever the answer is, there's really no wrong answer, because we as flipped instructors know that this is something that we have learned to manage and contend with. Is probably the number one question that we get when we're training people on using any type of a flipped model is, you know, well, what if they don't do the work, right? Well, we know that it's a flexible learning environment and that we can accommodate everybody, whether or not they have done it completely, whether they understood it, but we continue the cycle, and it's a self-paced learning cycle, which is really important about that developing student agency and having them accountable for their own learning. So just checking in. Thank you for your answers. And if you did, just to recap for those of you who weren't able to take a look at it, we basically went over the SOFLA definition that Dr. Marshall talked about earlier in the keynote. And it's a broad definition of SOFLA and how this instructional approach is used in an asynchronous and synchronous environment to create fertile spaces for learning. Okay, so it's providing a structure for teachers to deliver in both synchronously and asynchronously, right? So you can lead students along through a protocol that is easy to follow and engaging. That's the secret, because it's really a way, if you follow the steps, which here are the 8 steps of the cycle, you are ensuring, it takes the pressure off of you. You're ensuring that you are going to have students engaged for the majority of the time. And of course, the SOFLA instruction occurs in synchronous sessions online, right? It's a remote model. And you can see how you can engage students in a remote session and not just lecture. And of course, that's our goal, right? And if you haven't had a chance to study the cycle, there is a graphic of this in your shared folder, so you can take a look at all the steps. But this is what we went over in the pre-work, and you'll get plenty of opportunities to see these steps again. So obviously, we would normally open up a SOFLA session with the sign-in, right? That's how we get students engaged from the very beginning. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to do a sign-in now. And this is your question. What things do you consider when designing a flipped lesson? Okay, you're going to post your responses at Jamboard, and I'm going to paste that link in the chat right now. Just give me a minute. And if you have the, if you're in the folder, the link is also on the document. So why don't we go to take a look at that Jamboard right now. All right, so what things do you consider when designing a flipped lesson? Because let's talk about, and I say flipped because some of you haven't designed SOFLA yet, right? SOFLA is very new, but the principles of flipped learning apply, and you may have already designed flipped lessons. And what are some things you have to take into consideration? Because we remember in some of the questions I asked you to consider in the pre-work, or, you know, how is this SOFLA model similar to what you already do, and how is it different, you know, in both planning and delivery, right? So I see here we have the best way for students to actively engage with the material after the direct instruction. Right, engagement. So that's like when we're planning, what are the students going to do? We know our part, right? We know that we know how to lecture. We know our content. That's not the problem. Delivering a direct lecture is the easy part. It's what are we doing with the kids? And access issues, absolutely. UDL framework, yes. I consider the variabilities. I love it. Love flipped learning for its ability to differentiate. The same is true in SOFLA. It doesn't limit us just because we're working in a remote only environment to differentiate. And yes, synchronous versus asynchronous spaces. These are great. How to motivate them also. So one of the things that as you're entering and adding your comments, please feel free. I'm just going to keep discussing this just a little bit. One of the things that we thought about, and that doesn't always come up, is how do we know we're doing it well? How do we know? You know, we all write our lesson plans. We all consider ourselves experts. We have our degrees. But, you know, what are we doing to look at our lessons and make sure that we're on target? How do we assess ourselves, right? And then also, what are we doing to assess the students? I find that we often leave assessment for the end, right? We don't, you know, we should really start with the end in mind. And I'm a real fan of backwards design and thinking about where you want to go and how you're going to assess that you've made it. And that's one of the things that this rubric helps us as planners. It helps us to assess in the beginning, before we launch the lesson, are we on the right track? So I love all of these comments, and we will have an opportunity to revisit the board. You can continue to add your comments as we go along. So those are all great things that we have to consider, right? So we're going to take a look at the documents. I'm going to introduce the documents to you and how that can help us, okay? So this is our whole group application, which is step 3 of the cycle. But let me just explain first what the documents do, right? And then we'll go into the folder again and take a look together. So there is a SOFLA lesson review rubric, and that is the document that we'll be working with together today to evaluate a sample SOFLA lesson that a teacher designed in one of our workshops, right? And the lesson review rubric is used to help you design each step, right? And it can be used for self-assessment or peer review. It's a very simple document. And then we also have in the folder a SOFLA student Hyperdoc. Right now, the Hyperdoc is a student-facing document. This is something you would give to the students. It's written in student-friendly language, and this is to help them in a remote environment to follow along. So it provides all the links, it provides directions, right? And the resources so that they can participate in the cycle effectively, that they have, you know, everything they need to follow along. And of course, we know that it's a lot easier when you're in a face-to-face, person-to-person environment, teaching synchronously, to go over and say, here, click this link, or here's the handout, right? We don't have that luxury in the remote environment. So this is a document that helps you prepare for that. All right. So the last thing we have is a SOFLA lesson observation rubric. Okay. And this is a more complex rubric. We're not going to touch upon it in the time frame we have today, but it is there for you to take a look at. And it's a very detailed rubric for teacher training purposes when we're really getting into evaluate each step, not holistically, more analytically, but we'll take a look at that. All right, so I'm going to go back to the folder and I'm going to open up each of these documents and then we'll take a look together. So the first document I talked about was the lesson review rubric. Okay, so right now, if you haven't already done so, I'd like you to make a copy of this rubric for yourself. Let me just make sure I paste this in. And I finally get to look at the chat a little bit. Okay, so I see some nice responses. I still have some friends in the room. So I appreciate the support. I just pasted this link in so you can make a copy of this rubric for your own use in an editable edit, so you can edit it. All right, let's just scroll through it a minute together. So there are some directions on top on how to use the rubric, and it kind of reiterates what I said. And this is done with a scoring component. Obviously, it depends on your purposes. You don't need to use the scoring. So if you feel you just want to go through the steps and make comments with your friends, your colleagues, or for yourself, but it is a nice way if you have student teachers, or if you are working with a department and you want to use this as an evaluative process, you can provide a score. And we have virtuoso, experienced, developing, and novice, and all are very fine places to be. It's just a question of self-improvement, right? So let's look at step one just as an example of what you can expect, because you're going to look at these together in a moment. There are bulleted indicators of success, right? So it makes your job, your planning job, simpler if you're saying, did I meet all these things, or can I include or develop these more, right? So in the pre-work session, you're making sure that students have clear directions and guidelines because they're working independently. All right, you're making sure there's a viewing or listening activity that is a short introduction to a concept, and also has comprehension checks built in, right? It should include structured multimodal interactive activities related to that, but again, not too comprehensive, right? An introduction. And then the teacher also includes collaborative reading with social annotation and discussion options. So that's the pinnacle. If you had all of these things, you'd have a very interactive pre-work assignment. So I think you get an idea of this one. It is self-explanatory, and I'm going to let you look at it independently with your colleagues in a moment. All right. And then you have a place for notes and comments. So that's, I think, pretty self-explanatory. And Andrea's saying she likes the way of having to force the copy and view the document at the same time. That's great. I'm glad you appreciate that. We worked hard on that. So that's the peer of the lesson review rubric, right? So let me go back to my drive. It's not letting me click. There we go. Just going to back out a little. And here we are. Okay, so that was that one. Now let's take a look at the student Hyperdoc. And I love this document. I just think all of you who are familiar, and I'm sure because we're a room full of techies, you've used Hyperdocs before. So just to get an idea, if you've used a Hyperdoc, I could, yeah, Hyperdocs are awesome, Kate, right? So if you could give me a Y for yes and N for no, if you've used Hyperdocs before, then I know how much we really need to talk about it. It helps to, especially in a short session like this. Okay, so good. So I'm seeing a lot of people who are familiar or have used it somewhat, and a handful who are not, and that's great. So I'm really excited when there's people who haven't used it, because I feel like we are opening up your eyes to a great document that enables us techies to be even more effective. So a Hyperdoc, as many of you know, is a way for students to engage online independently, right? We are giving them the instructions and the links to complete activities completely in, you know, in an online environment, so that they can do their research, create, work collaboratively, and follow along in the steps. Now, this particular Hyperdoc is specifically designed for the SOFLA steps. There are Hyperdocs that are designed in many other ways, but we made this one to emulate or reflect the steps of the SOFLA cycle, so that as you're teaching, students can follow along. And it's very self-explanatory. We're not going to use this document today in our practice, but I wanted you to know it's here, and what you would do with it. You can, on your own, you know, I welcome you to make a copy of this document, and then you would just, you know, delete the directions and paste in your student activities. And I could talk a little bit about that more when we're looking at the sample lesson and how that lesson was converted into a Hyperdoc for the students to use. So we'll talk about that. Okay, we didn't want that. Okay, last but not least, and this is the document that we are not going to use today. This is a lesson observation rubric. This is something that you would use if you were actually watching someone deliver a lesson. Okay, so the first is more about lesson planning, the one we're going to talk about, but this is a lesson observation rubric where you are in a colleague's session, whether, you know, and you are actually looking for evidence of these things and documenting whether or not the evidence for each one of these items is present. And that is something that's useful when you are trying to instruct people on using this model and making sure that the steps are done thoroughly. Okay, so I think it's self-explanatory. I just want to make sure you know it's there, because sometimes you know, you're not motivated to go to the folder unless you see that it's there. Okay, so now let's last thing I want to show you, and then we're going to get to work. All right, this is the sample lesson. I keep double clicking, my mouse is acting really weird. Okay, come on, here we go. So this lesson was designed by a teacher, a science teacher from Long Island, New York, and she did such a beautiful job. I shouldn't, you know, but I want you to see how she outlined each step and provided a little screenshot of what it was. I just thought it was just so beautifully presented. But we're going to look at it closely and see if she has met all of the requirements of a SOFLA, of a good SOFLA lesson, in your opinion. And that's the stuff that's in the folder that we're going to use. Okay. So these are the three. I just have little highlights in the slides. 1, 2, and 3. So what I would love to do right now, and I think we didn't get a chance to talk about this ahead of time, but wanted to put you guys in breakout rooms. Let's see how many we have. Oh, so there's 25 of us. Jermon, did you want to help me put I can put them in breakouts if you want, but I'm looking now to see how many we have and how many groups we should do. Yeah, I do not have breakout options. Jermon, do you have options for breakout?
No, I don't see it on my menu here. Let me check. Maybe Matthew can help us.
Yes, I can. Breakout rooms. How many would you like?
All right, so we just need, we have what, 25 people. We could put 4 in a 3 or 4 in a room.
So do you want to go with 6?
Okay, that's perfect. I think, yeah, that way.
And assign automatically, manually, or let participants choose?
Automatically is
Done.
good. But before you send them, let me make sure our instructions are clear. All right, so here's what we are looking to do. I just want to make sure we had that. Okay. All right. So before you go in there, I want to make sure you assign someone to report out. Okay. So when you get in there, remember to choose a person to share out, because we don't have much time when we get back, and I don't want to be saying, looking for someone to share out. You're going to know who you are before you leave that room again. This is the lesson that you're going to review. All right. And the feedback I would love to have is basically, you're going to use this lesson along with the very first document, which looks like this. All right. And together you're going to look at step 1 and then see, does it meet it, and make some notes. Step 2, and see if it meets it and make some notes, right? See if it meets all the bullets, and talk about and explore the lessons together and have a conversation also about, is the rubric meeting the needs? Is it helping you? What ways might this rubric be better? Okay, so I'm asking you to think of this as a working session. This is the very first version. It's the first time that we're putting it out like this. So feel free to offer your feedback about whether the rubric works well as a tool, and whether or not this teacher's lesson, you're doing the multitasking. Okay, so if that is clear to everybody, if you would just give me a thumbs up or a yes or no in the chat. You can give me a Y if you understand, if an N if you do not understand, and feel free to unmute and ask questions before we break out.
I'm ready when you
We're all
are.
good? All right, I see a lot of yeses. So if we have enough yeses, that means the rest of you will be able to be supported by your colleagues in the breakouts. Okay, Matt, we're ready.
Done.
All right, I'll see you on the other side.
All right, rooms are open. Broadcast message to all. There you go. They seem to be populating.
Awesome.
All right.
Great.
There-
And I'm going to jump in a minute just to visit everybody, but I want to make sure they have everything they need in the drive. I'm just looking at something. Oh, and I forgot to tell them how long, but that's okay.
Well, I was going to say, how long would you like this to roll?
I would like to do it for, give them 10 minutes.
Okay, I will set a timer.
All right. Awesome. And I think 10 minutes would be good.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I want to see. Oh yeah, we got to go back to the Jamboard for a minute.
Okay, clock's running.
Okay, cool.
And Herman dropped the Google Drive link just a few little bits ago in the chat. So
Awesome. So they have that. All right, good. Awesome. Okay, this is my breathing moment. So
that's right. Yeah, it's always good.
And at this, you know, what's so nice about delivering in a tech conference is you don't have to worry about people struggling on their own in the breakouts. You know, everybody pretty much knows
That's
what
it.
to do.
No, we've all
So-
gained a lot of skills that never knew we had or needed.
Absolutely. But you'd be surprised how many, I'm sure you see it too. Well, first of all, Matt, you know, we haven't had a chance to meet, so I would love
Hello.
to just say hello and thank you for having me in this.
Not a problem. Not
It's
a
been-
problem.
How has it been going? You're doing a lot of things.
We are. It's gone really well. You know, this was something that we did last year.
So in the next lesson, it's to, again, keep students motivated and engage them in the process and sort of entice them to want to do that pre-work, because you're giving them a little sneak peek and you want to get them excited about it and show them some of the content, right? Just an introduction, and I'm not going to dwell on that, but that would be step 6. And in step 7 is when you go over the assignment for the pre-work, so that you're given the opportunity to speak to them face to face, you know, I should say synchronously online, to explain what you're expecting from them, in addition to providing them with all the resources, you know, in the Hyperdoc. So that would be the assignment. And we don't have, I do have something somewhat assignment-y for you, but obviously not mandatory. If you want to learn more about SOFLA, Helene has set up an amazing perusal account where you can take a SOFLA course. And if those of you who who are familiar with SOFLA but haven't joined this perusal course, which is the social reading, the social annotation, great reads and great comments about SOFLA. If you want to join that, this is the information. I'm going to provide this whole presentation as a PDF in the shared folder when we're done, so you can access this. So take a little screenshot of it now, so you have the info if you like. And that would be your assignment. So let's go back to the Jamboard and do a little reflection, all right? So that we can kind of get your feedback recorded. I'm going to, you're going to skip to the board number 5 because I didn't get to the previous one. So just jump over to page 5 or frame 5 and describe one way the SOFLA rubrics might support your lesson planning and delivery. But also feel free to say, well, they might, but I would like this, or they, you know, they're good. I would add that. So here's obviously some of the things we said, but some of the other things that, you know, there's an opportunity for some of the other things you might not have had a chance to mention. So we're reiterating basically what we said, but I would love for you to document it for us here on the board. For example, I'm certainly going to add something about the collaborative. Add more. That clarifies. So let's see what we got. Can help me keep an eye on details. Yeah, they matter. Well, we already know, you know, again, I was sharing with Matthew that I love presenting at tech conferences because, you know, we are all techies here and we understand that it's, you know, the devil is in the details. If we prepare right, I mean, every last detail as best we can, we know that we're going to have a more seamless experience in a remote setting. It's very different. And I think a lot of teachers, fortunately or unfortunately, were faced with that, you know, sink or swim methodology last year, and they learned a lot. But now we need to give all of our teachers some structure and some guidelines so that they can make their practice better. So that's really important about keeping an eye on the details. It's so much nicer to know ahead of time. We all learn trial by error, but if we can avoid some of that and by good planning, it's great. Add an indicator that, yeah. And I printed so I can have it in front of me as I create my lessons. Yes, and I certainly advocate, you know, having it, if you need on paper, print it out and have it while you're planning. Good for organization and also good to adapt in-person classes. You know, I shared that, Helene, do you remember I was saying, you know something, Helene designed this model because she's been teaching in remote learning environments for many, many years. And she did this naturally with her university students from the start. But I said, you know, the interesting thing is that this model works whether you are in a remote only environment or a hybrid environment. If you're in person, these steps can be equally as effective. So I thought for flipped learning, this was just a really all around great model. I like that comment. And now one question, do you think, do any of you have a peer review process, or do you think that you might share this with others who are in your collegial circle? Is it something that you think would be helpful for your teams? You know, if you, or you work individually? Because that's something we could.
Again,
yeah.
Heather, if I can add my experience. I have been implementing SOFLA into my classes the past semester at the University of West Bohemia. And I have been teaching a SOFLA course with my colleague, and your rubric saved our lives. And it was so easy to work with her with your rubric, or according to your rubric, because it was very easy to share our ideas and to work on it together, even though we were not physically together, and then sharing the same or using the same guidelines in our classes, and then commenting on that. So that was great, and thank you so much for that. I will speak about it later on today in the presentation I will have about my experience, and one of the parts is about your guideline or your template. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. That is just great to hear. And we have reached time, but I did want to just ask, there is, if you have questions, if you would like that you haven't posted in the chat, please, you can post a question in the chat right now so that we can get in touch with you. If you want to unmute yourself right now and you have a burning question, please feel free. I know we're out of time. I'm just going to share my screen one more time to wrap up. And so we did our reflection, and I thank you so much for your feedback and your help in looking at these reviewing these rubrics for us, with us. One last check out, so to speak, our reflection is based on today's session. Oh no, we did this too, right? And the very last thing is to say thank you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to talk more about this, please email me. I look forward to hearing from anyone who's interested in and has questions, is interested in doing more of this. Just let me know. I really, really appreciate meeting everybody, and a special thanks to FlipCon 2021 for making it possible. And if you like the slides, I believe in making sure we give everybody their credit. It was Slides Carnival. They have such great templates. So again, thanks FlipTech, and thanks to everyone in the room Hope to see you again. Take care.
All right. Thank you so very much to Heather Rubin. Thank you, Armand, for keeping track of that chat, getting this. It's kind of gets crazy when we start getting all these folks in here, but that's the goal, is to get everybody involved, everybody communicating and sharing. Hopefully, all of you do take a look at the contact information, keep in touch, because resources are key, and sharing and collaboration is what makes things move forward. With that, we are done for a little bit. We will see you guys again in 4 hours, because actually a little less at this point because we ran a little long, but that's all right. We'll see you again in 4 hours, because what we're going to do is we're going to start tying some things off. We have some great sessions in the afternoon / evening / morning, depending on where you're at. Set of sessions yet coming up. We have one more keynote, which is trying to bookend where we started with, is flipped learning relevant? And as we kind of come and tie off, does it need redefinition? That's going to be the keynote later today. And that is Kate Baker and myself. And we will have some sessions after that, followed by a bit of a Q&A roundtable where we want you to bring your best stuff or your worst stuff or the biggest questions to us at the end of the day, because in the end, the Flip Learning Network is a community, and it's a community made of you, not made of board members, not made of people who are authors or presenters. It is you. So we want you to bring everything to that later this evening. So take a look at your Edmodo, take a look at the announcements there as they go through. Keep an eye on social media, and we look to finish this whole conference strong. Thank you so very much, folks. Have a good day. We'll see you later today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're a nut,
Commercials.
Elaine. All right. Goodbye, all.
Goodbye.